Boys need heroes, and really I am just a boy at heart, and one of the best things about this is I get to meet my heroes. Patrick Humphries, again, this is in his own words. He is an activist who has been part of the Greater Boston Tea Party since 2009. Didn't mention he's president. He is a leader for the past 4 or 5 years, way longer before that. He has been active on issues from Common Core to the climate change hoax and other issues that don't begin with the letter C. He has worked in healthcare information technology and is, frankly, too modest to mention how many lives he saved in that. For more than a quarter century, he has been a tale or two about all that is well. And he doesn't know how to print, so he must be a doctor. Come on up, Patrick.
Good evening. This is essentially going to be a movie review. We had in the past looked at countering what was supposed to have been a climate conference this past June, propagated by our Mayor Marty Walsh in Boston, and along with his cohort John Kerry, that had been announced in June of 2016. But that never came about. But I've still been following this issue quite a bit, and of course people are familiar with the fact that Al Gore just released his sequel to An Inconvenient Truth called an Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power. First, I'll talk about the original movie a little bit. Everybody's familiar with it. This came out, it was an Academy Award-winning film that came out in 2006. Came out as won an Academy Award, his organization or his group won Nobel Peace Prize, not a science prize, but a peace prize. Science had anything to do with it. And the movie was widely distributed. Like this type here would have been something that would have been passing out to schools. And of course that made quite a big splash. One interesting thing about that movie, and then actually there's a follow-up, there's a movie made by a gentleman called Philip McLean, who created a movie called, to kind of counter that, called Not Evil, Just Wrong. Now, it's an excellent movie. I actually watched both movies in preparation for going to see the current feature. I do have one argument with the movie's title. It actually is evil, what Al Gore has been doing with this, because propagating the myth of climate change, the people who get hurt by that the most are the poor. And of course, Al Gore was a man of relatively modest means after he left the vice presidency and ran for president in 2000, as was Bill Clinton. The Clintons were broke when they left. They ran a charity and somehow came up to be worth a couple $100 million. How you run a charity and worth a couple hundred. I'm sorry?
Charity begins at home.
Charity begins at home. And when you're Al Gore, and you start with modest means, and you're trying to save the world, well, that's a much bigger project, so you should be worth about $300 million now, which is where he's at. So climate change has been very, very good to Al Gore. One thing to note about the original movie was, and that was actually highlighted in the counter movie to it, was that it could not be shown in Great Britain to school children unless there was a propaganda warning that was put out there, because there was actually a parent in Britain who actually sued. They took it to court, and they stated that there were 9 inconvenient untruths in it, essentially. 9 points of fact that were substantially wrong. And a good portion of that Not Evil, Just Wrong talks about that. Fast forward 11 years to today, and I decided, because I have this interest, to go see An Inconvenient Sequel. I had a little misgiving though. I was going to be providing Al Gore some funds. I couldn't think of an honest way to get around that, but Paid the $12 or whatever it was and went to see that. The good news is that it's not being widely popular. It's I think it's about 3 weeks in. It's only earned $3.024 million at the box office last time when I looked it up this morning. So it's bombing pretty well. The global warming hoax, I think, is there's quite a disbelief in it, I think, is for the general public. There's been a number of people who've been active on countering the narrative that's out there. One of them is a gentleman by the name of Roy Spencer, who is a climate scientist, and he actually cranked out a book that's on Kindle called An Inconvenient Deception, he also went and viewed the movie, and he went through, and he's a climate scientist who actually was part of the IPCC, which is the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and he viewed the movie and came up with a number of critical points about it. And I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we could actually come up with 9 or some number of, very inconvenient lies about the current movie? Of course, Dr. Spencer did a much better job of it than I did, but there's a few things I'd like to highlight about it. One part of the movie that they actually talk about, the main theme of both films is that everything would have been fixed if Al Gore had been elected president in 2000. It's in both movies, very prominent. He doesn't quite state it quite that way, but in both movies, very prominently, he talks about the fact that he lost. It was a close call. And it's not just a minute or two in each movie. It's probably, it would be nice to time both of them, but I'd say it's probably approaching 8 to 10 minutes in both films. Both films are very self-serving. Needless to say, Al Gore is nothing.
He's a victim.
He's a victim. He's a victim. Yes, he's a victim of those horrible Florida voters and those Supreme Court justices, etc. Yes, he's a victim. That being the first thing that he was not elected president, but one of the things that they talk about during the first movie was he was talking in, of course, Inconvenient, the sequel, where the sea level rise was going to be massive, and he was widely criticized, and that was one of the major points within the rebuttal film, essentially, that was completely false. And then he goes and shows he's going through Miami, and there's flooding going on, and it's been worse than it's ever been. Flooding is exceptionally different. I mean, that I think is a complete lie in and of itself. Flooding is exceptionally different than a permanent sea level rise of 20 feet.
Yeah, really.
Well, that's what he was prognosticating an inconvenient truth.
Right.
But the thing is that he's showing flooding in Miami as being a counter argument, saying that no, my predictions are coming true. And for whatever reason, people. Okay, I did go and look at the movie, but the vast majority of the people, well, I wouldn't say the vast majority, the number of people who go to see that movie are actually swallowing this malarkey, hook, line, and sinker. Which, thank goodness, there's not that many. He also does the same thing with, well, actually, the focus of his point about that was, though, the 9/11 World Trade Center site. That was actually the one he was talking about was the most, egregious, where they're showing that being, 20 feet underwater. There was some flooding after Hurricane Sandy. And again, flooding is not permanent sea level rise. And then, actually, Dr. I'll just read very quickly the ones that he lists. Warming temperatures, Greenland melting, that's actually the opening part of the film. Sea level rise, yes. Storm damage, solar power, solar city, pressure on India to use solar energy. I'll talk about these latter points very shortly. Typhoons, wildfires, conflict in Syria. You didn't know that global warming causes terrorism, did you?
Oh, jeez.
Severe drought in Syria led to the rise of ISIS.
The drought in Syria.
The drought, yes.
Bernie Sanders.
How could they tell?
Well, that is the claim, and Al Gore is, of course, going to great lengths to say that the droughts are much more severe because the earth is hotter and the moisture is coming out of the soil. Yes. But then, and Dr. Spencer actually produces graph within his book, and I would recommend it. If you're looking for solid information about it, I would recommend it. It's a Kindle-only book. It's $4. I would recommend it. But he actually has a graph in there showing that actually the drought in Syria, there really wasn't one during the years of the rise of ISIS. Crop yields are lessening. CO2 is a bad thing, and then the Paris Climate Conference. Okay, I'll wrap it really quick. Is actually the main theme that goes throughout the whole film is that he saved the Paris Climate Accords. It was in danger. The Indians were saying, we have 1.3 billion people, and 300 million of them are without electricity. And it is immoral to tell people that they cannot have cheap energy. And actually that gentleman was quite right. He was telling Al Gore and company to, take a hike. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to see it, Al Gore, who is heavily invested in Solar City, although he doesn't anywhere within the film talk about where he's really making his money from, and the fact that he's a leader at Solar City, transferred some technology to the Indians, and he also arranged some financing so that they could build some solar panels, and that they would nominally get on board with the Paris Climate Accords, which Dr. Spencer actually goes through and debunks pretty much everything line by line. But truth to power, there is no truth in this film. It's just more of the same BS. And what's nice is that it's being so poorly received, and that actually pretty much it seems like climate change is off the table, at least for the short term, until somebody tries to raise it again. Yes?
All you need to know is that when Al Gore sold his television network to Al Jazeera, he bought a mansion in Malibu. The front door, or the living room door, sliding glass door, opens up to the Pacific Ocean. And he was so worried about the rise of the ocean that his front door is 6 feet above the high tide mark.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. The truth about Al Gore is really the inconvenient truth. That is truly that. Thank you.